Hello, this is Christian on the Graeyzone, and today we have
Silas,
Rob,
and Raouf, and today we're talking about the consequences of depicting other cultures as antagonists in media.
we started off with talking about this off of Boof's own video, off of his channel with the link in the description below. But Boof, would you like to give a summary about what you talked about?
So in that video on my channel Mustachio, in the fucking great naming tradition I've come up with, I talked about video games specifically and how often negative depictions of Arabs come up. So I talked about different stereotypes using Dr. Jack Shaheen's study that he had made about movies, and the three main ones were depicting Arabs as terrorists, two, only ever depicting Arab heroes as Bedouins or people from like medieval times, so no contemporary heroes, and three, the few contemporary heroes we do have are all fucking oil barons and real estate agents who are swimming in cash. But for today's video, sounds like we want to focus in on the first, which is the terrorist stereotype.
Right, and then we're going to bounce that off into other cultures as well. But let's start off with the Arab depiction, because in today's media of video games, especially more recently with the Call of Duty series, and with real-life conflicts that have happened within the last couple decades, Arabs have been depicted as the terrorist type, bad guy shooting with spicy language so that you can't understand them. And that made sense for the time being because, that was the United States' real life enemy. Whether that is or isn't true, actually, whether that's, politically...
whether it's right or wrong.
Right, that's not the question.
What was happening at the time.
Exactly.
And so the question is, what are the consequences of that portrayal?
Right. So what are the consequences? Well, people see Arabs as terrorists.
Yes. Yeah. And we're not just spitballing here. In that video I made, I referenced a study done by a professor at U of M, Dearborn, who had found, to very, briefly truncate the study, she found that people who had played games depicting Arabs as terrorists, what she did, she had them play the game, and a while later she asked them to draw, she just said draw an Arab, basically, right? She's like, just draw an Arab. And they drew, your average looking, terrorist dude with the sunglasses and all this shit.
The sunglasses and the bomb belt?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
So they look like the great Saiyan man when he doesn't have the helmet on?
Yes, actually. So she found that people who played those games are more likely to associate Arabs with terrorism. I know this isn't exactly a mind-bending conclusion,
No.
but it's good to see someone doing the scientific approach.
And yeah, it makes sense. If you play a video game or you're exposed to some media that you like, then you're going to attribute certain real life characteristics to what you saw in that game, right? And Call of Duty, it's in modern day. It's not some fantasy world where you can disassociate it with real life. No, Call of Duty is actually real life. So
yes, to an extent, because in Modern Warfare 1, you don't go to any particular Arab country, I assume, because they were worried about, alienating those people. So you basically just go to fictional Arab country registered trademark. I don't remember what they call it. I don't remember if they call it anything in Modern Warfare 1.
Are there any stats on, what I would consider the other modern day Arab, especially bad Arab stereotype, which it comes to kind of the dictator, the guy wearing the beret that is in a military outfit? Because that's also kind of a...
Well, that's been the huge antagonist within a terrorist.
No, because that's generally not depicted as a terrorist. That's generally depicted as a tyrant.
Yes.
As a leader of a nation who is suppressing their people, or somebody... Even, it's kind of a stereotype of that is the character who is the traitor in, if they're a part of the U.S. military, they are the people to betray the U.S. military in whatever work of media it is, and are working for some shadowy master.
The thing is, I'm sure those examples exist. I didn't find any in video games.
I know one, and Samir Duran in StarCraft, and this is circa 1998. He is very much.
He's an Arab in a video game that's depicted as what you just explained there.
Yes.
Those are StarCraft 1 graphics.
Well, yes, they are. But
I see.
he is very much supposed to be. That is that 90s depiction of kind of. That's a pre 9/11 depiction of like the more like shady stereotype, and I've seen that in pre 9/11 films as well.
Well, yeah, you would be riffing off of people like Saddam Hussein or Gaddafi, people of that nature.
But that is another conversation, because if we're going to look past the 9/11 depictions, there is also the other depiction of, well, if Arabs aren't terrorists, then they are tyrants, and that is to rile people up here to say, oh, it's okay to invade.
Yes.
So first off, I want to ask, is it okay to depict those things in video games, real-life events that are caused by certain cultures? And I think that the answer is yes, it is okay to do that.
Yeah, it's okay to depict them, but
yes.
Here was my sticking point, and Christian can actually add to this because he did a bit of research about it. It's not necessarily, like, if you were to have a game where Americans fight Arabs, I personally, I can't speak for every Arab, but I personally wouldn't, like, get that upset about such a game if you're depicting a real-life conflict. But the problem at the time, especially around, we're talking about right after Modern Warfare 1, so like 2007 to like the mid-2010s, all those Modern Warfare games where you fight Arabs, when you only depict one side of the conflict as heroic, like when you hyper-focus in on the American point of view, right? There is no context about anything from the other side. What you are putting out is propaganda. And Christian, you can add to this because you looked into it a bit.
Which part?
Someone on the reason I thought of this is because someone on my video left a comment about how it felt like all those Modern Warfare games were like psyops operations by the U.S. government.
Yes, that part. So I've looked into the past, and the U.S. government at one point, especially the military, was putting some money into these games and encouraging them to depict certain things because it, in the past, the U.S. military had a big problem with new recruits shooting high or shooting low, meaning they're not shooting to kill. Well, they tried to do some tests and studies to see if you get people more used to violence and shooting people in games such as Call of Duty, are they going to shoot to kill because it's more like a video game if your boot's on the ground. Now, whether that's true or not, like, whether you do or not, I don't know. But that's what they were trying to find out, and they had sunk a lot of money into that stuff.
Yes, they were putting money into stuff like Call of Duty and I assume Battlefield and things of that nature, at least.
It's kind of in the same vein as how the U.S. military sunk a bunch of money into things like football and national sports and having people stand for the anthem. That used to not be a tradition until post 9/11 when they started giving money to these organizations to do that, and that's why, excuse me if I mispronounce his name, but Kaepernick?
Kaepernick, yeah.
Kaepernick. That was originally, there wasn't really there wouldn't have been an issue with what he did except for, save for the fact that the U.S. military was paying the sports organizations to do this. Oh. So that's why the sports organizations were so anti him.
Interesting.
Because they were receiving money for doing this thing, and he was not doing the thing that they were receiving money for.
So you can see that, like, American football and this sector of video game development are very closely linked to that brand of jingoism.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why, to answer your question, Silas, these games, I suppose, have a right to exist, but we have to acknowledge that when the way they frame the conflict is an attempt at propaganda, not some hyper-accurate depiction of the conflict.
And I agree. I mean, I think that if you were to... Call of Duty is a streamlined game. It does not involve all the little nuances and politics that go into war. It's just, you shoot, all right? Yeah. And then bad guy at end of barrel. So I understand that they do need to be made. and that we shouldn't limit those from being made. So don't get me wrong, viewers, watchers, listeners. I'm full support of video games doing whatever they do. I just think that after a while, these games are going to become incredibly outdated with their depictions of these cultures, right? And so that's what we're seeing in these days with Arab depiction, specifically within the Call of Duty, the Battlefield, the Medal of Honor stuff. Medal of Honor did some stuff, right?
Yes, there were 2 games. I think one was just called Medal of Honor. The other was Medal of Honor Warfighter, the greatest fucking title of all time.
So yeah, but what we're talking about today is the consequences of that, and we already kind of covered that a little bit earlier. Now there's the terrorist side that we just covered, right? Then there's also, it's either that or you're some oil tycoon with a bunch of money. Now, Boof, I know I'm Arab, but I'm a mutt, so I can't represent a whole culture. You are 100% Arab.
Yes.
You said it yourself in your video. How do you feel about these depictions?
It's interesting when you talk about the consequences, right?
Right.
I talked about that Bedouin stereotype, how so many Arab heroes and cultures. Let's not just limit to Arab as well. You can look into Persian, because Americans clump all these cultures together, like Persian, like Afghanistan, Iran, all these places.
Moroccan.
Moroccans are Arab.
Moroccans are. Well, I am Moroccan.
He is Moroccan, but what I'm getting at is, sorry, I should rephrase that. A lot of Americans will clump Moroccans in with the Middle East.
Oh yes,
like
all of North Africa.
All of North Africa is the Middle East.
Yeah,
and that's below Spain. That's
well, we are no longer in the middle of the East. Pakistan, all these places. So when you have games depict all of these heroes and settings as being either in modern society but far removed, like these Bedouin camps, or we just only ever see medieval depictions of these places, what you get is, I used to work at the Arab American National Museum, and when I was giving tours to people, I would get asked questions like, oh, did you guys have TVs in Kuwait, which is where I used to live? I was like, not only did we have TVs, asshole, but we were getting Japanese imports of stuff before you guys did. So I had those big Samsung TVs before you guys ever did.
Ooh, so rich, right?
Why is that? Do you know? Is that because of shipping rights and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's over land. You don't have to ship it across the entire ocean.
I mean, what?
It's not overland.
What?
Japan's an island, but
well, Japan. No, I mean you put it
closer.
It's
yeah,
closer.
Sure,
it's closer.
I mean, kind of.
But
I don't think so.
Trade restrictions too.
I think it's closer, but U.S. has more trade restrictions.
That's true.
I'm gonna guess U.S. has more trade restrictions than Kuwait. I don't live in Kuwait, so I don't really know.
Well,
but
I don't know.
U.S. is weird about some shit.
Yeah.
Okay.
The nuts and bolts of the economic and trade policies, I don't really know.
No.
But what I do know is the effect, which is, and I talked about this in my video, for example, that's why PlayStation was infinitely more popular than Xbox, is because we were getting all those Japanese imports, while American markets never really seemed to care much. I don't know if they weren't putting the effort in, or if there were logistical barriers. I don't know about that side of things.
Yeah.
Right. Even in my work, back to what we're talking about, even in my work, and I've worked with, very, very, very mayonnaise companies.
Mayonnaise companies?
Yes.
I didn't realize that you were in food production.
I'm not in food production. I'm talking about the general taste of the people there. They're white, and, I have no problem with it. Don't get me any sort of it wrong. But it would be funny because, me having my last name, having a nice beard, and looking darker than, your average white person, I would be the butt of some of these jokes. And sometimes I would like it, it would be fun because I like to be made fun of. But that's, I still would get some of these terrorist jokes, or even, where's all your oil money jokes, or, I would be the receiver of those things. I wouldn't be offended per se, but it's still there, right?
Well, if someone were to come up, the intention matters in this context, right? But I will say that though that kind of commentary kind of clues me in that okay, this is where their thoughts go when they think of Arabs, right?
Exactly.
Like that question, oh, did you have TVs? Did you have electricity? Those questions weren't asked with malicious intent necessarily, right? But it does show like, okay, this is what people think they know. But I didn't want to bring Rob in because we've been going for 16 minutes.
Oh, yes, you're good. I don't know.
Well, Rob, you play a video game a lot.
The reason I don't have very much to say is because I played Call of Duties, and then I play 1 or 2 video games, if you count Magic the Gathering Online as a video game. And the depiction in Arabs in League of Legends and the depiction of Arabs in Magic the Gathering isn't super negative. They're there, and sometimes they're good people, sometimes they're bad people, but that's all the races in both the games.
Right.
Right.
I was talking about before we started, Magic the Gathering has a whole set where like Arabs are all super great engineers and they live in this super modern like futuristic city and they build all these like cool helicopters and
It's like Wakanda for Arabs.
it basically is. And then like the antagonist is a Russian named dragon. You know, it's kind of weird. And then in League of Legends they have their registered what is it? What do you call it? Registered Arab
fictional
country.
Arab country registered trademark.
Yeah, they have that, but it's more based on Egyptian culture, so it's like older school, and all but 2 of the characters are like reborn into I want to say monster bodies, but like non-human bodies. Like you have a dog, you have a bird person made of sand, you have a coffin that came to life, and you have a crocodile. Then you have the 2 women who are from, like, the one is very obviously Arab, but she's like a good guy, and the other is a bounty hunter in the desert. So it's like it's not very skewed in either direction.
Right.
Same with Magic, like, they have their Bedouin set. They have a, sorry.
No, that's good. That was right.
Yeah. They have a set that's based in that, and it's based off Arabian Nights, which is also the title of the set. Christian talked about how it follows a book very well, but I just played the cards. I didn't really care about that because I was very young. I think Arabian Nights came out before I was born, and I just had some of the cards because I have my own.
The Arabian Nights is set.
Yeah.
It came out before we were
the Magic the Gathering. Yeah.
Right.
And it is to your point, Rob. I'm not the point of the video I made. And the point I'm making right now isn't necessarily like I'm not demanding that Arabs be skewed 100% good.
Well, no culture is 100%.
Right.
No.
And I'm not calling Arabs bad. That's
no, I know.
What I'm going for,
but for me, it's like there's such, and we know this, right? There's such an overwhelming concentration on the negative side that we need to address it.
Especially for us, we were raised in a time where the Arab conflict was a huge part of life.
I also do want to say for all of us,
we are very different
than
most of America.
I want to talk about that now because it's like I played Call of Duty and I shot Arabs a fuck ton in Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops.
We all did.
But I also grew up in Dearborn, if not the heaviest populated.
It is.
It's
the
second.
I think it was when we were younger, the heaviest populated Arab community.
I think London is now?
Outside of the Middle East.
No, L.A. was at one point,
but
that's because they have millions of people, and we have over 100,000 people.
I think I meant
concentration.
Yeah, or density.
Per capita, we have the largest concentration of Arabs outside of the Middle East.
I may have grown up shooting Arabs in my video games, but at the same time I'd go to school and I had Arabs who were friends.
Who are also shooting Arabs in the video games.
Pretty much my entire life I have known, I've had an Arabic friend, and I know that sounds racist, like, I have a black friend. But I'm trying to say I grew up with the culture differently than most Americans who are playing those games grew up with the culture.
Now, this is not as much as Boof, who lived in the Middle East in Kuwait for quite some time. But I grew up in East Dearborn, and
that's very close.
All of my neighbors were Arabic. I was, besides the Romanian kids who were straight from Romania and did not speak English, I was the only white kid besides my sister on the block.
Yeah, I grew up in Westbourne, so less Arabs, but elementary school, when I was in elementary school, I was in 4th grade, we had someone come, I don't remember exactly where it came from, but we had someone move to America from the Middle East, and We all got to know him. We all helped to teach him English.
Yeah.
Like, it was normal. Like,
That's cool.
that's how we grew
Which is
up.
great, that's great. But for your typical,
Yeah, I'm just saying
standard,
it's kind of weird for us because
we're kind of biased. Yeah, we're definitely biased because of our situation. Because of our
And like you
location.
said, Rob, people in the Middle East and the Arab world in general and the Muslim world in general also love Call of Duty.
Yeah.
You've been getting those wonderful, wonderful YouTube comments.
oh
Yes.
dude, the YouTube comments don't even. I read all the comments. They don't even compare to the comments on Facebook are so fucked. The comments that people left you on your video are like,
that's great. Keep
"Fuck
them
you!
coming."
You're not even a real Arab. Like you whitewashed garbage human SJW." And I was like, "Holy shit! I thought that was your people, man." Like,
People don't like
Nature.
Arabs get protective of Call of Duty.
Yeah.
their game, man.
Well,
So
they love it.
I guess I need to qualify everything I say with like I'm not talking for a billion people.
No.
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
I'm just talking about my perspective.
In CS:GO, are the terrorists Arab?
I don't think so.
No, they're nondescript terrorists.
I think their skin tone might not be Arab, but I think it takes place in an Arab.
There's Arab places there.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but
Like
I was
the
gonna say
maps.
like they kind of I kind of like the way they do it because you play as both. You play half your games as terrorists, half your game as counter-terrorists, so you get both points of view. There's no story, or there might be a story. I'm sorry if you play CS:GO and there's a story, but I think games should have both point of views, and
The thing is that
terrorists shouldn't always be the one planting the bomb. But
the thing is that study that I referenced about the one that the U of M professor did was that even when Arabs weren't the terrorists in the games, in fact, I think she was using modded versions of Counter-Strike.
they still think that they hear the word terrorist and they think Arab.
Yes.
Yeah.
They
Which
do
is
not
bad.
think IRA.
No.
No.
So we're still like linked no matter what in pop culture.
And strangely, also, Arabs are also linked with Balkan terrorists too, like Chechens.
Yes.
Because Chechens are not Arab.
No.
That sounds Russian.
They're Russian, and they fight with the Russians all the time, and they carry out terrorist acts against the Russian motherland. But they aren't Arab, but they're generally grouped into this kind of like darker skinned, bearded group. They're more they're definitely Eastern European and more in line with, I would say, Turkish, but like in that category. So,
Yeah, well, that's also just Americans not being able
Yeah.
to distinguish.
I have an odd statement to maybe make. Isn't the KKK recently considered a terrorist organization?
yes.
But you hear terrorist and you would never think
White
KKK
people. KKK, yeah.
is a terrorist group. But they are. They are a terrorist group.
Not yet. Well, so
No,
is,
I'm
Antifa now considered a terrorist group too?
I don't know about that, but I'm pretty sure very recently the KKK became a terrorist
It
organization.
depends on the times, though, too, because in the 1920s, anarchists were the main people thought of as terrorists.
Right.
Like, there was so much propaganda coming out all the time in the 1920s
about anarchists.
about
and,
anarchists trying to blow up things.
punk.
And then you don't usually think... I mean, a lot of people identify as anarchists nowadays, and you would not consider them terrorists.
Right.
Actually, it's looking like I'm just skimming, so I might be wrong, but I actually don't think the KKK are
No, I don't
considered.
think so. I thought they were recently, but I guess
There might have been a call to.
Was it the neo-Nazis?
Probably it was
Probably.
someone.
Yeah, I know some like American
Some white supremacist group?
recently got labeled as like, yes, this is a terrorist
Terrorist group.
group.
I know that Juggalo... Can we talk about discrimination against juggalos? They're considered the
Maybe in
gang.
a different video. Maybe in a different video.
So back on topic, I think Boof brought up something, or Christian, you did. Like, it's not just the Arabs, all right? It's Russians are still depicted as the quote unquote bad guy, the BBG or whatever.
And the Germans.
And the Germans, especially the Germans.
I think the Germans,
Just because they
Not-
are a bad guy
not
does
the
not make
current
them
day
bad
Germans,
guy.
but the other Germans
The
that are
Nazis.
depicted as
the Nazis.
the bad guys may deserve to be depicted as bad guys.
And
for the other
even, I'm sure Germans, you ask your typical German, they'll be like, yeah, okay, Nazis were fucking bad.
You could make a strong argument about how the Kaiser, like Kaiser Wilhelm II, and the Germans during World War I should be more depicted as a neutral party as they were not really the bad guys.
I agree there. I mean, when you talk German, you think Hitler. Hitler is World War II.
But even in America, the Second Reich under Kaiser Wilhelm II is depicted as this evil empire, even though Britain, who we were allies with during the First World War, was also an evil empire that was in India and putting people down and killing people.
Well, that's the problem. Again, I think this is just people lacking historical knowledge, because I've seen...
And suffering from the propaganda that has come out and it has subsisted.
Because in Battlefield 1, which was a Battlefield... I fucking hate how they name games nowadays. Battlefield 1 was the one that came out a few years ago about World War 1, not the original
like
Battlefield
the Xbox
game.
One that came out with the worst name ever.
Jesus.
Expo.
So that one was about World War 1.
Yeah.
And yet they still kind of like cast the Germans as though we were playing a World War II game. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, what was the point of changing the setting if you're still going to treat World War I era Germans as Nazis?
Yeah, which is just
they do that
classic
in
American
the Wonder
education.
Woman movie as well. They very much treat the World War I Germans as Nazis. Instead of treating them as another opposing side in a war. Because that was a very neutral war. Both sides did very bad things in regards to civilian casualties, but there wasn't the types of genocide that took place in World War II.
In World War II. So,
at least between the Germans and the British.
Right.
Actually, this is something I want to touch on. We often don't talk about we will talk about the Holocaust, but we won't talk about other atrocities as well, and that is something that, as Americans, we are very bad at depicting. We don't talk about the Rwandan genocide. We don't talk about Pol Pot's genocide.
I talk about Pol Pot all the time.
You do, but we're on the Graeyzone.
The second you started talking about other shit, I was like, I can't wait to talk about my boy Pol Pot. Go to U of M, Dearborn, take... I forget the professor's name, and they'll read you my paper on Pol Pot.
And we don't talk about the Armenian genocide, and that's what actually made me think about this, is the Armenian genocide, I believe, took place during the First World War, right? It was during that time period.
Let's not be wrong about this.
Let's definitely not be wrong about that.
I think you're right.
And it was being substantiated by the Ottoman
in
Empire.
1915 and ended in 1917.
Okay, so
the Ottoman Empire.
Yes. So
Those were World War I.
now the Ottoman Empire was on the Central Power side.
Yes.
During that war, but the Germans were not perpetuating that. That it was in fact we've gone full circle. It was the Ottomans perpetuating a genocide against the Armenians in that situation.
Yes.
Also, not to downplay the amount of Jews that died in the Holocaust, but also the Holocaust was also against the Poles.
The Poles,
like there's a whole different death toll
Poles.
In the Nazi genocide of the Poles, which was over 1 million people. It was almost 2 million people.
The Poles, the Jehovah's Witnesses,
Yes.
The LGBTQ
plus.
I don't know if you could call it that at the time, but
it
that
was
community,
the homosexual community there.
Mm-hmm.
And the Colombian genocide killed almost 33% of their entire population.
I think.
So TLDR, all right?
Yeah, it's
TLDR. There have been other atrocities.
Other races that have done a lot of wrong, including white people.
Yes. Especially including white people.
Especially including the biggest Holocaust, the biggest atrocity of all time. But we do cover it in video games.
So
we don't cover Mao Zedong's starvation of the Chinese people in video games.
There's political issues there. Anyways, here's
they won't develop that video game.
Well, there was real quick.
Need to sell
There was a Taiwanese game that had like one bit of graffiti on a wall somewhere that was critical of the Chinese government, and it got pulled from Steam.
Yeah.
It got pulled from Steam.
Yes.
So
holding on to big games.
So people on Steam can make horribly white supremacist games.
Hentai Lolly Nazis the Third.
Hentai Lolly Nazis the Third. In fact, there is like a game like
there
that.
are many.
Oh man.
There are many.
But
I thought that was the actual name of the game.
That might be the actual
no, I'm pretty sure there's a game that's almost exactly like that.
Yeah.
But people from Taiwan who don't have recognition because of political pressure are not allowed to make games to talk about their own freedom.
Yes. And remember, this was not even a game necessarily about that.
No,
there was a bit of wall somewhere in the game that was vaguely critical of the Chinese government. It was called The Devotion, too.
Like, when people talk about how... I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of things that Americans do, but when people talk about how we do have free speech, we do have much more free speech in comparison to China that will... Like, there are so many games out there that are critical of America that are allowed to be up, but this is...
I mean,
it was the Winnie the Pooh meme.
do you
yeah.
guys know about Blitzchung? Of course, the Taiwanese Hearthstone player.
Oh, yeah,
who got
absolutely.
himself and the 2 casters fired because he said he stands with Hong Kong
And
on live stream.
You know, I'm actually very... All in all, he did an incredibly good job because he brought awareness of the corruption in the gaming industry. Like, because a lot of people were unaware of the Chinese investment into the gaming industry.
Yeah, Tencent. Tencent.
Yes.
And other companies
Owns more than 10% of gaming.
Yeah.
That have used gaming as an easy mark. Sorry, we've gotten off track.
Well,
Let's
you
get
know
back
what?
to it.
I was going to say that we are still vaguely on track.
Yeah, we are.
Because if we're talking about the consequences and aftermath of depicting other cultures as antagonists, well, it turns out a lot of the time they make your game disappear.
They make... Well,
Or you can't make the game.
So this goes to show that if the culture has enough money and people that are going to buy the game, and they are not going to want to buy the game because of the depiction, then the game will not be made or it will disappear.
Well, yeah,
but if the
it's-
culture, such as in the groups of angry people on Rauf's Facebook commenting, if they are okay with the depictions, they'll still buy the game.
Yeah.
Especially if they aren't the majority market. Like,
Yes.
if the game can be made, people will buy it. But if there are censorship issues, then people won't buy it, and then nobody will make the game.
So the thing is that you have your big 3: Germans, Russians, Arabs, that have been depicted as the bad guy in video games specifically.
I don't even think it's fair to say Germans. I think it's Nazis,
Yeah,
Russians, and yes, Nazis are German, but I don't see a lot of
Contemporary.
non-Nazi Germans.
Except World War I Germans.
Yes,
Yes,
but
no-
even that they somehow, like we were talking about earlier, muddle,
make them into
muddle
Nazis.
World War I Germans into
Nazi
Nazis.
is your base because you can depict them as the worst people ever because
They were.
They still are, and everyone will agree on that to a certain degree.
Well, yeah, they're
Everyone's
like,
bad.
It's pretty easy
It's
to
pretty
dislike
easy.
Nazis.
And then the stand-in for historical games are generally the Huns and the Romans are the bad guys
Right.
in historical games, and then sometimes you'll get like... You actually usually don't get Arabs as the main bad guy in historical games.
No, it's
You might get
They get-
Turkey. You might
Yeah.
get Turkey
The
as
side bad guys. They're not even the main.
but it's the Huns and
obviously,
the Romans.
but the Huns were so crazy that people can get behind hating
Exactly,
them too.
so-
yes,
Yeah.
they are the Nazis of... See,
they really are too because they just are.
they are the equivalent in certain situations. As the Romans
As
are
good
the
as you could do with the
equivalent.
sword.
The Romans are the equivalent of the modern day Russians because they have a large empire
Yes.
and have a lot of control and structure. The Huns are the very quick rising and very quick falling empire of Nazi Germany.
Yes, they're Asian sword Nazis.
So, TLDR, if
On
you're a bad
horses.
guy, you're a bad guy, right?
But
it
just
is
because you are a bad guy does not make you a bad guy.
Oh, I know, and that's the point of this video. And, I wanted to bring up something real quick. Nazis, yeah, okay, Germans were the bad guys, and in fact, that stigma lasted with them even till, more recent times.
there are still Americans who you say the word German.
They
to.
think Nazi. They
Yeah.
think Nazi. And that's, at that point, it's probably a meme. But-
This is like the shape of U.S. Imagine you're below this line if you think Germans are Nazis.
So,
But
know,
it does say something that when we're talking about contemporary games, it's Arabs and Russians.
Right.
Because who does the U.S. have beef with right now?
Arabs
mean-
and Russians.
Games are set
In contemporary time.
Yeah.
Not games
not
made.
contemporary
Yeah.
games.
Yes,
Right.
That's how you fight
contemporary.
aliens and space people.
And that's another point I actually want to bring up. So if we go to Halo, for example, right? Your main bad guy is Alien, the Covenant, right? Your standard elite, your standard grunt, your hunters, all of these lizard-looking foreign bipedal humanoids that are actually doing something bad against a human, so that you retaliate, and that's fine, right? We don't have aliens in our culture that look like these things that we need
But
to.
when we do, Silas, is it going to be an issue culturally that we...
Thank you. Okay, so
I don't know. Are they bringing us rose baskets
what
or
happens?
nukes?
What happens when a spacecraft lands and out pops a grunt?
Here was this
The
video.
Couple grunts?
Here
No,
we are now.
Can't be the flood. It cannot
What
be.
happens? No, the
If the
flood is
flood
a
co-
hive mind.
The flood is a hive mind,
You
and
can't-
that's an actual evil thing that will
no,
take over.
why is hive mind?
Wait, hold
why
up,
are they
but what
evil?
about all the shooting of robots we do? We're probably closer to having robots live next to
true,
us
it's
than
very true.
aliens that look like the Covenant.
Right. so robots too. I mean, well, they don't have feelings. They're not separate entities. We
Yeah,
program them.
but what about the good robots?
When
Yes,
di-
what
when-
about the good robot?
when
Listen,
when
I-
Detroit
listen.
Become Human becomes the most relevant
Yeah,
game
listen,
of our times.
I will. This might be a point of contention 30 years later in my life. Like
We're revisiting this when aliens and robots are
But
here.
when alien robots are, I will shoot a robot in the face. I won't have
I'll
any.
shoot a Silas Abdullah in the face. Who gives a fuck? A specific Silas Abdullah, not generic Silas Abdullah.
I'll shoot a robot.
Depends on the circumstance.
So you can just download his memory somewhere else.
I, for one, welcome our new alien overlords.
Thank you, Christian.
they
Thank
can't
you.
run. They couldn't run the place any worse.
Yeah.
That's true.
Very true. But the point is that what happens hypothetically if like the Covenant were to crash land and they were actually a peaceful sort? Like our entire mantra of your alien.
We have the movie Avatar. Aliens are the good guys in that.
Yeah, but they don't look like the Covenant. They don't look evil.
What do the Covenant air? I
They
know.
look really stupid.
They do.
If that's what aliens we get.
They look like they have long dick
That's what we
maniacs with predator face, and they look weird.
Is it a racial depiction of aliens?
It is.
Is it a
but
poor racial depiction of
we
aliens?
don't know aliens, so we don't have any basis to go off of.
They just look kind of like a different version of the Protoss. So the Protoss are good guys. And in,
I think this is going. I think
Anyways.
we're losing track of what. Our
Yeah.
All right, well,
But
let's
you
get
know
back on
what?
track.
To tie it together a bit, it's funny you mention because Halo, because Call of Duty and Halo, first-person shooters, fucking Call of Duty treats Arabs and Russians the way Halo treats aliens.
Aliens.
Yes.
Just like easily disposable. Like we don't need to justify shit.
Right.
And that's always been the problem with Call of Duty is that they like any scene in the campaign that they could have used to build any sort of story or context does not exist because that would get in the way of you shooting people in the face.
That's what I was actually going to ask. Would you be, not saying that you're against Call of Duty, but would you like it better if the story depicted more of why we're at war?
I would
Would be more appropriate.
well, I hold Call of Duty in contempt for a lot of reasons.
But there's a lot of issues with the game, but like storyline, a storyline specifically, if they did a better job at covering why we're shooting Arabs in the face, would it be better or would it be worse?
Well, I would also want the perspective from the other side because if you think I need to be careful with the way I frame this.
Yeah, this is all very touchy. We're all trying to be careful.
So if
Don't step on the
let's imagine
let's talk
that
about Egypt. Let's talk about Egypt.
well, I want to talk about Iraq actually.
Let him make his
Because
point.
let's
I wanna
say
hear this.
I do have a fun thing I want to do at the end. Do you want me to tell you that before you say what you're about to say? I want everybody to give it their idea, like what game they want to be made.
okay.
Okay. All right.
But
so continue
if-
on with your point.
You're an Iraqi dude. You're from Iraq, and you're living in a village, and some U.S. plane flies by and just drops a bomb on your village and like murders 600 civilians, which we know has happened. You
Yes.
have
Yes.
civilian death counts, and you survive. You might kind of be like, perhaps I'm not super on board with these Americans. You see what I'm getting at?
These newfangled Americans, maybe they're not the best.
I don't know if I agree with their tactics.
So when you view things from that side, it's kind of like we kind of understand what fuels the other side. Do you know what I mean? I'm trying to be careful because I want to be disappeared when this video comes out. Do you get what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, the way I kind of got this perspective is through Grave of the Fireflies and Our Place in the World. I think it's our little corner of the world. It's something like that.
I don't know. I'm
both,
sorry.
They're both anime movies, and they both depict like regular people living life.
The Field of Fireflies or whatever.
Grave of the Fireflies.
Grave of the Fireflies. Yes.
Grave of the Fireflies and Our Place in the World. They both depict regular Japanese citizens just living out their lives, preparing for, like, digging bunkers into sides of cliffs and things like that as bombs are dropped. And Grave of the Fireflies has a worse ending. Found the movie title. It's In This Corner of the World. The main character, there's a scene where her sister-in-law, her younger sister-in-law, is killed and her arm is blown off, and it makes you very angry to see the way that it is depicted. Really changes your perspective, as opposed to if you had just watched something like World War II in color, or any type of American-centric work.
It's one of those things where it's like history is written by the victors.
The victor, yeah.
So
that's
America can say whatever they want happened in World War II because
they don't, and even
they showed up and it ended.
They don't have to portray the civilian dying. Because
No, in fact, there is footage of after the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that was never shown to the public. There was some footage shown to the public, but there was a large category of they went through these areas afterwards, and it is horrifying, charred bodies everywhere, and like literal piles of bones.
It's sad.
Because they were blown, like the bodies and corpses were blown into areas, so there were like collections of bones up into piles.
Yeah.
And that was not shown to the American public because of political reasons.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that makes sense for the time, but nowadays we want full disclosure about these things.
It's funny. Japan's an interesting example because they actually have like the global media presence nowadays to actually be able to push some of this stuff from their end.
And they do.
Because like your average Arab country, I mean, we have plenty of films that are made in Arab countries, but they don't get shown here, right? Maybe your
the language is too spicy.
Yes. But Japan has like that media presence where they actually can, which sort of subverts the victor gets to tell the story because they actually have the clout to tell that story.
And they targeted the youth and I don't want to say outcast subcultures, but what is the term for subcultures which are non-mainstream?
Out-group?
Non-mainstream. Like,
hipsters.
No. Better one. It's
subculture. We'll shorten it to subculture for now.
Counterculture?
Counterculture. They targeted counterculture groups and the youth originally when they were pushing anime into America, and then that really picked up, and now it has become much more mainstream. My Hero Academia is a mainstream show.
Yes.
Most people in our generation, a majority of them, know of it.
Right. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, what would happen if there was a video game made by any of these groups that we have demonized, depicting the Americans as a demon?
Japan has done this. I don't know which game, but I know that they have.
They've made a shooter game.
There's Valkyria Chronicles.
There are World War II games which are neutral, meaning that you can play as the Japanese and you can fight the Americans. They have things like that.
Japan made Valkyria Chronicles, which is a fucking anime version of World War II. But you actually play as what's I assume are the ally because like they change all the names and shit. It's not as spicy as actually depicting World War II. It's like the Winnie the Pooh version of World War II.
Ooh.
But that would get
You
bad.
play-
Shout out to China.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But you play it as what I assume are the equivalent of the Allied powers. But you only ever fight the equivalent of Germans. You don't ever fight the Japanese or whatever equivalent. So that's weird, I guess.
But the Japanese have done a very good job at
Depicting
this
the other
because they
side.
have they have a cultural aim of they want to collectively do this. They
Yeah.
want to show this. I don't want to speak for Middle Eastern cultures and countries, but sometimes it seems as if that is not as much of a concern as
Priority.
a priority is that sort of like global dissemination of look what's happening as because the people in charge seem to be vying for power in certain
Well,
cases.
the bottom line with that is what Boof said in his video. They just, if an Arab community wants to, shed some light on that, they need to make the game happen.
Yeah, that's
There's not a unified front though is what
No,
I'm saying.
there
Like,
isn't.
Japan
No.
it has they have 180 million people who are much more on board with that sort of a thing
Right.
and aren't as splintered.
Well, the
They
problem
have
is that the people most likely to tell those stories, like the Arab countries most likely to want to tell those stories, are still basically like,
Under the thumb of the American
yeah,
military.
they still like Iraq is still in a very poor place.
They don't want to give America another reason to shoot them.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
and they,
well, Saudi is unlikely
Yeah,
to do that
yes.
at all.
yeah.
That's what I was getting at by.
Well, yeah, I know what you were getting at. Saudi won't do it. A lot of those countries don't like they want to be buddy with the U.S., so they don't want to do that. 50 years from now, like let's say the Iraq War is as far away from the modern
The
now
present day.
as
World
Yeah.
War II is.
Yeah.
from the Japanese perspective. Then we might see some interesting games, but that's why, like, if I were to make a game like Call of Duty, I wouldn't just have a bunch of Americans fucking making it. If I wanted to make a really interesting, in-depth game about the war, I would bring a lot of different people from all the countries involved on board, but you can't.
And yeah, sure, there would be a very interesting game based off of that.
Right. So, I mean, the final point, for me at least, is like, Call of Duty has a right to exist. These games have a right to exist. I don't like them for various reasons, including the ones I talk about in my video. And I would not hold them up as some sort of exemplar of defining the conflict.
It's not an appropriate portrayal of what happened.
No.
Rob, you brought up something. Speaking of creating video games.
Oh yeah, my idea is for all of us to talk about an ideal video game that covers something differently. So, do you have an? I know what mine is, and you guys aren't gonna hit mine. Mine is super weird. So,
Okay.
I'm not worried about going last. Or
Boof.
Boof sounds like you have one queued up. You want a game basically reverse Call of Duty, but written by people who actually lived in Iran during the experience.
Iraq.
Iraq. Sorry,
Yes,
my bad.
but I mean, that's not even my ideal game. That's if we had to make something like Call of
If we
Duty,
had
that's
to.
how I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
want it made. But in my video, I mentioned what I want to see the most right now is a game about your average Arab living in a city like Amman or Beirut. And some people in the comments pointed out, well, that would be a boring game. I'm talking about, like, let's say your GTA-ish type game, like an open world type deal where you're playing as someone from humble beginnings who may trip into powers or wealth or whatever, right? But the base would be, this is some guy who lived in a contemporary Arab city who has that background, who can share that experiences. Do you know what I mean?
But
Yeah.
doesn't fit any stereotypes.
You want a real
Yeah.
world depiction of what it's like to be an Arab in a modern Arab environment.
Yes, and
Not-
that's what we don't have.
Yeah, okay.
There's someone pointed out in Assassin's Creed Origins. Do you know how Assassin's Creed has this fucking like modern day thing?
I literally just avoid Assassin's Creed because I think
Yeah.
all their games are shit after 3.
You know, no, I agree, but in Origins, like these new ones, they do have the person filling in Desmond's role is apparently an Arab lady, like a modern Arab lady. So there's that, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's also an Assassin's Creed, so I don't
So
care.
it's a terrible game. It holds no merit. So Christian, what's your...
My ideal game, I'm going to pass until...
Okay. I was hoping you had something. My ideal game, I guess... I would love to get like more of a visual world on not just contemporary modern culture in Arab lands, but just having the open world of an Arab culture, like somewhere in Morocco. What? Yeah, kind of, but not really. I want more of an exploratory, and yeah, it doesn't have to fit stereotypes, but it can. It can have the desert explorer guy. I thought Prince of Persia was a cool game, not just because, the action stuff, but I love the scenery. And I love some of that Arab scenery in architecture, too. I love that stuff. And I think that Arab cultures create beautiful buildings and beautiful depictions of art and everything.
Oh, I guess that would make sense coming from your perspective as an architect.
As an architect, I love the art, and I would love to see just a game that involves that art.
Stop fucking around with Assassin's Creed, Ubisoft, and give us another Prince of Persia.
Yes.
That's what we're asking for.
Are you ready? Go. Go!
Yes. So I have mine. I want mine to be... If we're going to pick any...
Just go.
It would be great to see video game representation of the people who, like a lead up and fight to Tiananmen Square.
Okay.
It would be really great to be able to see a depiction of, like, from the perspective
of Bag Lady? Tiananmen Square?
From the perspective of somebody living there.
Okay.
And then having it be, like, you have to, like, try to start this revolution or try to start this protest or something like that. You could... Another one that would be really interesting, because I don't see... I like a lot of historical stuff, is seeing a video game depict the fall of the Soviet Union, like in 1991,
Okay.
to actually see a story about the ending there.
Yes.
I
That would
never
be cool.
see stuff like that.
That would be cool.
I have two.
All right,
and
Rob.
neither of them have anything to do with Pol Pot. That's the big shot. One is called League of Legends 2. They remove Yasuo. They remove Kane. They remove Yon, who they haven't put in. Yi, get him the fuck out of here. Teemo, gone. Great game. Anyways.
What's your second game?
I want a game where you play as both sides of the French Revolution.
Ooh.
You're running from the guillotine in one scene, you're eating the rich in scene 2. I think it'd be fun. It covers a very weird point in history, and it's super different. It's class warfare.
I hate that it has to be this, but Assassin's Creed Unity kind of did
No,
that.
better. I want it done better.
Like a game where you get to improve the efficiency of the guillotine on one side.
Yeah.
So you have like two factions, and you gotta I gotta put more points into my guillotine ability or my spy network.
So Les Mis the RPG.
that takes place in a much later revolution, Silas.
What?
Yes, Les Mis is
I'm
not
dumb.
about the French Revolution.
I am dumb.
It's like 40 years later, I want to say. 30 years later?
Is it really?
Yes.
Okay, well,
It's alright, the French are always having some revolutions, so...
I think it'd be fun to play as the poor eating the rich.
That'd be cool.
Okay,
So I
think
guess that
we've
wraps it up.
Yeah.
My name is Silas.
My name is Rob.
I'm Raouf.
And I'm Christian. Like, comment, and subscribe on this video.
Let us know what you thought.
This has been the Graeyzone. Have a good night.
Or midday.
Or morning!
Or whenever you're
Have
watching.
a good day.
All right.
Bye!